Our next Distinguished Alumni Award recipient is Vincent O'Malley. Dr Vincent O'Malley is an award-winning Wellington writer and historian who has authored many best-selling and acclaimed works on Aotearoa New Zealand history, including The Great War for New Zealand, Waikato 1800 to 2000 in 2016, and the New Zealand Wars, Ngā Pakanga o Aotearoa 2019. His book, Voices from the New Zealand Wars, He Reo no Ngā Pakanga o Aotearoa, won the General Non-Fiction Prize at the 2022 Ockham New Zealand Book Awards. In the same year, he received the Prime Minister's Award for Literary Achievement in Non-Fiction. Vincent completed his PhD at the Stout Research Centre and in 2014 was awarded the prestigious J.D. Stout Fellowship. In 2023, he was awarded the Humanities Aronui Medal by the Royal Society Te Aparangi and was a semi-finalist for Kiwi Bank New Zealander of the Year. Would the Chancellor and the Vice-Chancellor please come up to present Vincent with his award. Ho mai te pakipaki e te whānau.
It is lovely to meet you, and this is the first time I have met you actually today, and I find that quite surprising, to be honest. I think we know an awful lot of people in common. History was your great love right from the get-go, wasn't it? And I'm curious, what lit the fire?
I'm not sure. I think there are aspects of history that I find really appealing. One, I mean, the research side of things is a bit like detective work.
Yeah.
And you go to the archives and you're never quite sure what you might find. And sometimes you might spend a week in archives and literally find nothing. That can be pretty frustrating. Other days you find incredible things. Years ago, I found a document down at archives in Thorndon that was the original draft of the ultimatum to the Tainui tribes in 1863, prior to the invasion. And this was supposed to give the iwi an opportunity to lay down their arms and spare their lives and their lands. And I found that it was written one day after the invasion began. In other words, it was a fabrication.
Yeah.
It was window dressing to make it appear that they had a choice. They had no real choice at all. So it's not every day you find things like that, but when you do, that's quite exhilarating because that changes our understanding of that history. And prior to that, there'd been kind of anecdotal evidence of that, but I found the original document with the date on it, 13th of July, 1863. The invasion began on the 12th of July. So that kind of changed our understanding of that. So there's that. I suppose the other aspect of it is the writing side, and there I think what I enjoy is the storytelling aspect, and I think that's what draws people in. Less the sort of list of facts and dates and all that kind of stuff, but more the stories about how this big history influenced everyday lives. And I'm kind of, that's, you know, I've written all of these books about the wars, but it's more of a social history of the wars. I wouldn't classify myself as a military historian at all.
You came from a big Irish family. Down south, when I say down south, Christchurch.
Yeah, that's right. 9 to 9 kids, big Irish Catholic working class household in Christchurch.
Plenty of storytellers?
Yeah, well, I could barely get a word in edgewise being the youngest. So,
I can imagine. You know, we understand that. We from Māori whānaus, that's for sure. You had two particularly important university mentors when you came here, and you were the first from your family to come here to university, yeah?
Yeah, absolutely. So, you know, for my family, I think I was the first to get UE, or maybe even school cert, not sure about that. So,
what did your folks think about you going off to university?
I think they're incredibly proud. I mean, I think there were, being the youngest, one of the sort of environmental factors that made that possible was by the time I turned 15, most of my older siblings had left home and got a job in a factory somewhere. Because when you've got 11 kids in a 5-bedroom home, you know, it's you don't necessarily want to be there when you're 17 or 18 sharing a bedroom with 2 or 3 sisters or whatever. So by the time I got to 15, the financial pressure on my parents had eased a bit, and I could afford to start school, and I didn't have to share bedrooms. So that sort of made it possible for me to start school for longer. And so I had that opportunity that really my older siblings didn't in some ways.
It's terrific that you struck out and came to university. You had Anne Parsonson, I think, and Tipene O'Regan as 2 of your great mentors.
Yeah, and I suppose, I mean, with that, I didn't learn any New Zealand history at school, and so I went to Canterbury University and enrolled in a whole bunch of European history courses because my history teacher at school had told me New Zealand history was boring, nothing happened here. And
you believed him.
Well, I believed him. He was the teacher.
As we did back in the day.
I remember I asked him one day, I said, "Sir, why aren't we learning the New Zealand history?" He said, "It's boring, lad, forget it, nothing happened here." I didn't know any better because I hadn't been exposed to it. So I went to university and enrolled in a whole bunch of European history courses, and then I decided to drop out of something else, Economics 101, I think. And I was looking for an easy filler course, and I looked in the Cantor Student magazine, said New Zealand History 101. I thought, well, it'd be boring, nothing happened here. My history teacher told me that, but I need
easy credits. Ask Tanya.
6 points, I need that. So I did that, and I was blown away by that. Anne Parsonson was my lecturer, and I thought, why didn't I learn this history at school? It's the opposite of boring. It's fundamental to who we are as a people, as a nation. So just having that initial exposure to that history was massive for me.
What a shock. And tell me about your earliest O'Malley relatives, because they settled here from Ireland back in the 1860s, around the time of the Waikato War. Do you know much about them and how they were welcomed into this country? Yeah,
I'm becoming sort of increasingly interested in the sort of Irish, the history of the Irish in Aotearoa. And so my family, they migrated to Christchurch in the early 1860s, and the Canterbury settlement was founded in 1850 as an Anglican church settlement, and basically no Irish Catholics need apply. They weren't welcome. But about a decade later, the leaders of the city realised that they had nobody to work as labourers or to clean their homes. They needed domestic servants and labourers, and where are they going to get them from? So they sort of they used the immigration controls a bit, provided assisted passages for Irish Catholics, and that's when my relatives sort of began flooding in, and it was a sort of process of chain migration. And they all kind of clustered around the same parts of Christchurch, almost a ghetto. And I think somebody said to me years ago, you're one of those Irish Catholics in Christchurch with a evenly balanced, a chip on each shoulder, aren't you? Because at the time it was quite a conservative sort of city, and you very much had a sense that you were an outsider in some ways, growing up Irish Catholic at that time. It's changed a lot now, I think. Did you know many Māori when you were growing up? At the time I thought I didn't, but looking back now I realise I probably did. One really cool thing for me in recent years has been the opportunity to do some work with Ngāi Tahu as well, and I think for me that's been really important to kind of assist them with their process of a lot of the post-settlement things that still need to be sorted out, and in this case it was an issue relating to the management of water, which is really critical, particularly in Canterbury. You ended up working at the Waitangi Tribunal, and I mean that was a really important part of your life, and really shaped where you went eventually, because I suppose it brought the storytelling together when you started to understand the history as well. Yeah, so I got through Anne Parsonson, I got offered a 3-month contract in Wellington. Came up here researching treaty claims for iwi, and sort of 30 years later, I never left really. So, and still, more or less doing the same things. A lot of it, there are some differences now. Things have a lot of the issues have sort of moved from the Waitangi Tribunal more towards the High Court these days. But one of the things I learned early on was that there was this incredible coal mine of research being done on our history that hadn't been done before to a forensic level of detail. And unless you were a claimant, a treaty lawyer, a member of the Waitangi Tribunal, you didn't hear that history. And so very early on I thought, how do we share that with other New Zealanders? Because they need to understand this history. They need to understand basic things like when a treaty settlement is signed, iwi typically get 1% of the value of what was lost. This idea that Māori are getting rich at the expense of other New Zealanders, they're actually signing away 99% of what was lost every time a treaty settlement is signed. People don't understand that. They don't know just basic things like that. So for me, it was kind of like early on, I really wanted to try and find ways of reaching a wider audience to share that history and share that knowledge with people.
You wrote, the New Zealand Wars was a series of conflicts which profoundly shaped the course and direction of our nation's history. Studying those wars really profoundly shaped your history too. Tell us about that. Why did these events become your greatest focus?
Well, that began really for me with, back in about 2006, I was commissioned by the Waitangi Tribunal to do a couple of reports for its Rohe Potai, or King Country inquiry, about the Waikato War. And at the time I did this, there was kind of an assumption, hasn't this all been done before? Jamie Ballach wrote a couple of chapters on this in his book, and these will be quite short reports. And in the end, they were 1,500 pages long. And of course, Jamie Ballach did wonderful work on that, but there were lots of aspects of this history that weren't part of his brief. And, so things like the socioeconomic impact of those conflicts on Māori communities. With the Waikato War, for example, so after the war ends at Arako in April 1864, the Māori survivors of that retreat south of the Punia River, which becomes the new boundary with the Crown. So the King Country is the remaining land available to them. The population of that district doubles literally overnight, and people die of starvation. And I hadn't heard about that. People starving to death in New Zealand history since 1840 as a result of the actions of the Crown. And then I did some work on the war casualties and worked out that they were probably higher in relative terms than those suffered by New Zealand troops during World War I. And that's supposed to be our greatest bloodbath, Gallipoli and all that. But there were these huge conflicts right here that a lot of people didn't know anything about. And, I'm not saying that we shouldn't recognise those who served our nation overseas, but we should also remember the wars fought here, because they're part of our story too. And what I've always sort of said to audiences is we need to be big enough and brave enough to accept that history. It is part of who we are. And I think for me, the encouraging thing is young people really get why that is important.
And that's in part thanks to you, I think, too. Or you've certainly been campaigning for quite some time. You've played an important role in pushing for New Zealand history to be taught in all schools. And that became a reality for students in years 1 to 10 from 2023, I understand. Do you think we finally are mature enough to talk about our history, warts and all?
I think we are. I mean, we're seeing a certain backlash to that at the moment.
Yeah.
But I think the wider social trends, are pretty hard to shift, and that is that growing numbers of people are accepting of the need to engage with this history. And I've found real enthusiasm and a kind of yearning to learn about this history when I've spoken to many audiences. And I think one of the other things I say to Pākehā audiences in particular is it's not about feeling guilty or ashamed about the actions of your ancestors. It's really about what we do about this today, now. How do we think about that history today? And that could be in all sorts of everyday conversations we have about, do we still want a grey street in our town, or all those sorts of things. Are these memorials, are they still appropriate in this community? Is there something we can do about them? Maybe we can contextualise them so that they acknowledge the missing people who aren't memorialised, who are typically the Māori victims of these conflicts. So there are conversations we can have about how we think about this history today, but first of all we need to learn it, we need to accept that it is part of our story, and I think we're getting there.
You have written extensively about how recent government proposals have negatively affected the way the past is remembered, understood and taught. How do you think we put that right?
Well, there's a whole range of things. I mean, one of them is that we need to ensure the work of historians continue. At the moment, we're seeing cuts at the Ministry for Culture and Heritage. They have hugely popular websites like Te Ara and New Zealand History that get tens of thousands of visitors a week, and they'll be left to wither and die. And those are incredible resources for people who want to understand our history. So we need to support that. We need to, there's currently this proposal to review the Aotearoa New Zealand History's curriculum that was introduced only in 2023, as you said, and to rebalance it. And I don't even know what that means. Does that mean that we go back to the kind of rose-tinted version, the best race relations in the world, all that kind of stuff? Because that would be a huge backward step. And so we really need to hold on to and protect what we have striven for many years to gain. The work of so many people, iwi up and down the country, the Aotearoa College students who gathered 12,000 signatures for their petition, and they grew up in the King Country. They visited Araka and Rangiawhia, two of the sites where some of the worst atrocities of New Zealand wars were committed. They hadn't learnt any of that history at their school, about 20 minutes away, and they went back to class and they thought, why aren't we learning about this stuff? And then they thought, what can we do about it? And, they changed history. That's what they did about it. So we need to hold on to that. We need to protect that.
If there was just one major change in how New Zealand engages with its colonial history to be introduced in the next decade, what would it be? I think funding for resources to promote awareness of that, and that could be done through a lot of ways. It could be done through drama. There's so many incredible stories, Parihaka and so on, that, there would be incredible opportunities to tell those stories in a range of ways. It doesn't just need to be, it doesn't only have to be in the form of books or whatever. The Mihi Forbes documentaries that I've been privileged to be part of are a great part of that as well. So I think just the funding and support to ensure that people have the opportunity to learn this history and engage with it is the really critical thing. Well, Vincent, thank you for all the work and effort and care that you have taken to ensure that New Zealanders do understand their own history. It's been magnificent talking to you, and thank you so much, and congratulations.
Thank you.